I'm Troy Reynolds.
And I'm Tricia Cave.
You're about to go on the educational record. Welcome to On the Educational Record, a YouTube series where we grill the candidates about their positions on educational issues so you can make an informed vote. As you make that informed vote, we hope you'll join us in the block vote. If you don't know what that is, we'll cover that later on in this video, so stay tuned. Tricia is not with us right now. Tropical Storm Beta is causing trouble in her area, so you teachers out there who have had to make do in your classroom while teaching remote with technological issues, I hope you can relate. Meanwhile, I would like to welcome today's guest, Sharon Hirsch. She is candidate for House District 66.
Yes,
right?
Correct.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for the invitation. I'm really looking forward to the conversation.
I am too, and I'm glad you said conversation. I'll say something about that later on in this because conversations are so important and we don't have enough of them these days. Why don't we start out simple though? Tell our viewers a little bit about yourself.
Okay, well, I'm a mom and of 4 great kids. My husband Jim and I have been married for 45 years. Yeah, long time, high school sweethearts. We have 2 great grandkids. We migrated to Texas in 1996. Jim was a career educator, 40 years in the business, and he was invited to come down. We were in Minnesota by a former superintendent who had come to Plano. So at the time he was working on the technology piece of education. You know, there were no computers at the beginning of his career, right? So as computers came on the scene, he developed a program for the school district in Minnesota. So we packed up the minivan, and sold the snowblower and came to Texas. So we've been here now 24 years. I'm super active in the community, worked for the school district for 12 years, and then retired to do some different things. I wanted to get into politics. I was a late in life college graduate. I started college when I was 55 years old, finished when I was 59, and was ready to do some different things. So running, for House District 66 was really important to me because I'm passionate about public ed, and I wanted my community to have an education champion in Austin. So that's where we are now.
Well, and let's talk about that passion for a moment. Can you take us into your philosophy about public education? What is your philosophy of the importance of it and where it stands in society?
Right. Well, I think education is the best investment that we can make as a state. So when we invest in students and their children and their future, it's win-win, because it's a win for that individual. They have an opportunity to have a better income, better housing, healthcare. All of the outcomes are better with a great education, and that in turn is good for society. We not only want an educated workforce, but we want curious people, lifelong learners in our community. So to me, it's an investment in both the individual person and an investment in our society. So to me, it's one of the top things that we do as a state to fund our schools. I mean, we have a constitutional obligation to do so, and we should do it as well as we can. Absolutely.
For our viewers out there that don't know our ratings, our next question is about our rating system. So a short explanation. Texans for Public Education rates candidates either friendly, neutral, or unfriendly toward public education, and uses that for what we refer to as the block vote. You are the block vote candidate for House District 66, so the group will be uniting behind you and all voting for you, all of those that live there, of course. We gather that information from any source we can find: voting records for incumbents, campaign platforms, interviews like this, statements to the media. We'd look at endorsements and contributors to the campaigns, and then all members have a voice in those ratings and votes. So for the viewers, that's when we refer to friendly, neutral, or unfriendly in this conversation, that's what we're referring to as that rating system. I know what friendly means to me. I'm curious what friendly means to you, friendly towards public education.
Right. Well, as you said, as an incumbent, it's pretty easy to see how you vote, right? And if you vote with the best interests of students and teachers in mind, then you would be a friendly candidate or friendly incumbent. As a candidate, candidates make a lot of promises, right? And they tell the constituency all sorts of things. But I think for me, I have a lifelong track record of being friendly to public education. I believe really strongly that we need to engage the educator community, with parents, students, teachers, staff, everybody in our conversations about education. I mean, these are critical decisions that we're making, and all of the partners, I think, should be involved in those decisions. So friendly to me also means open, open to having those conversations, and to work together on the best solutions. So that's really what friendly would mean to me.
Thank you. What do you see as maybe the top 2 or top 3 issues right now, specifically in Texas public education? What should the legislature be addressing immediately?
Mm-hmm. Well, my big concern this upcoming session is just making sure that we take no backward slide when it comes to funding. Big promises were made with HB 3. That bill was good, but we're still in the bottom quartile when you look at national spending on public ed, and we can't go back. This was years of neglect, really, I feel, in looking at the formulas, adding dollars, keeping up with inflation and growth. And so funding is critical. I think we need to take another look at equity and how we are handling that, how we're paying for that. I've never spoken to anyone who says they don't believe that all students should receive that great public education, whether they live in a property-rich community or a property-poor community. But recapture has kind of grown into this monster, right? Where communities are having to give huge sums of money back. So I think it's past time to revisit that and see what we might be able to do different to make sure we lessen some of those onerous burdens, but still take care of the equity issue. We're going to land up in court again if we don't do that, right? Mm-hmm. I think COVID has brought out some real definite new issues and problems, and I think we need to look at how we're recruiting and retaining our teaching staffs. It's important that teachers go into that profession knowing that they're going to be supported, and I think, quite frankly, a lot of folks feel that they're not, making sure we shore up retirement and benefit plans for people so that those insurance costs aren't eating away at what already is a salary that, is significantly flat, most of the time. So, and maybe the third thing is, we have to recognize the impact that a student's experiences outside of the home or outside of school impact how we're teaching our kids. I think we're asking school districts to do an awful lot when it comes to, it's not just teaching math and science. It's how are we dealing with kids that live in poverty? How are we dealing with kids? And again, COVID brought this to the forefront, that don't have technology, that don't have internet access, that don't have supportive people in their home that can help them learn. So I think we need to be addressing those issues, whether that means additional counselors in the schools, but really we need to take a hard look at those things. And I know the session is really short and there's not a lot you can get done, But number one is that we cannot have a backslide at all on funding as far as I'm concerned.
Agreed. And to corroborate something that you said, you mentioned, recruitment and retainment of teachers. And I believe it was last year, it may have been 2 years ago when it started, but I think it was last year. For the first time in history, we had more teachers leave the field than enter the field. We've always had teacher shortages, but that was because of growth. But now we have people leaving, and the students in college don't see the value of becoming teachers. So we've created a culture where they don't even want to enter the field.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that, some of it is due to the pay and benefits and that, but it's also just this undermining of the profession. I don't know why it became easy for people to pick on teachers. They're doing the hard work. I've been on enough campuses, and with 4 kids going through public schools, they're doing amazing work, and they're being asked to make changes and modify constantly. It's like, what else are you going to throw at us? And they do it, right? So we need to stop that undermining of the profession, because absolutely you're not going to encourage young people to go into teaching if you continue disparaging teachers.
Another issue that kind of surrounds all of these issues that has arisen over the last, actually it's probably been expanding, since the mid-1980s. And that is this question of local control versus the state running the schools. And while I will acknowledge that if the state is putting money into the system, they should have some say, it would seem that there should be some kind of balance between the two. And we see that balance tipping more and more each session toward the state, to the point that there are legislators right now who are very vocal about the kind of power that, for example, Commissioner Morath has, where a single unelected official has the power to reallocate funding that the legislature has already earmarked.
Right.
So what's your opinion on that balance? Where is that balance between local control and community control of their schools and state responsibilities and oversight? How do you find that balance?
Yeah, I'm alarmed at the intrusion of the state into not just school districts, because I think they started there. Now they're working their way through cities and counties. As Texas is changing, I think in some regards it's partly a feeling of losing control themselves, over whether you talk about ideology or specific interests. But I like the notion that we have state standards. I think that's important, and the state kind of determining what the testing mechanism is, that to measure if everyone's following along with those standards, and then to make sure that we fulfill whatever federal mandate we have for delivering that information. But the one thing I always talk about with Texas is it is enormous, right? And there are so many variations in these communities. So I think communities should have the taxing authority to raise the funds that they need for their schools. I was opposed to putting those really stringent limits on communities to do the kind of things they need to do. I think, again, we went back to that equity piece. I think the state has to be they have to revisit that and make a commitment to making sure that students in every community, have opportunity. But I think the local communities should be able to address their particular needs. So I know that most, I think, of the districts have made a Districts of Innovation plan. So that gives, quite a bit of, or at least some leeway to make your own, rules. But I think that's the balance. The state, I think, needs to pay their fair share, their 50% of funding, address equity, and and going back to the standards, that should be standards with a lot of input from educators when they're developing those. So I've always been a proponent of local control simply because it doesn't make sense for the folks in Austin who are not close to that community, and they're not teachers. They're not, they're not the elected school board. We should be holding those elected officials accountable if they're doing things that we, disagree with. So,
you mentioned community needs. I'd like to ask you a question on that. I want to extend on one thought that you started there about community needs. The state compressed or lowered district tax rates.
Right.
And yet, in general, property owners are still paying higher property taxes right now because the appraisals continue to rise.
Right.
People like me argue that that is proof positive that the problem that is costing property owners so much money lies at the state level and not with your local school district.
Mm-hmm.
What are your feelings on that?
No, I agree. I agree with that 100%. But, going back to the whole Texas model of relying heavily on these two taxes, sales tax and property tax, and then I want to say a refusal in a way to look at other revenue sources. This has caused a really tough burden on the average person, right? It's estimated that there's close to $60 billion in exemptions in the tax code. And of course, every one of those exemptions has a constituency attached to it. So, if you take it away, somebody's going to be mad, right? And there are exemptions that, we like, but like the formulas, the formulas for public ed, we don't look at them often enough. We hadn't looked at the funding formula for about 30 years, I think. And it's the same thing with those tax exemptions. So I think we need, I'm not of the belief that we don't have the money to fund schools or we don't have the money to properly fund Medicaid. I reject that notion. All you have to do is look at campaign finance and you see that there's all sorts of money floating around out there. And it's establishing priorities. Who are we going to help? Are we going to help these individual homeowners that are really burdened by these excessive taxes and find other ways to help fund schools or not? To me, it's a lot about it's priorities. You establish those priorities just like you do in your household. And then you look for funding to pay for it. I think it's there. And I think we need to turn over every rock to find it.
Okay. Earlier in the conversation, you talked about everybody makes promises to teachers. And I agree with that. Matter of fact, one of the things that formed this group and the reason we now have so many people is teachers are becoming a bit cynical and they're tired of platitudes. They're tired of being patted on the head and teachers are important and then nothing ever happens.
Right.
So the hard question for you is, if you make it into office, what concrete plans can you give that you would move towards and how would you get there financially and so forth? Can you give us concrete ideas that you want to work towards and not just general concepts?
Going back to funding, I think we need to be better at determining what the actual cost of delivering the educational experiences we want our kids to have. So I would like to look at some sort of, I don't know how you would do that, but some sort of real analysis of what the true cost of education is. Because we kind of throw money at, or I won't say throw money at, that's a really bad thing to say. We say, here's what we have. Do X, Y, Z with it, rather than saying this is what the actual cost is. So to me, it's determining what the actual cost is, making sure we establish what the cost sharing is amongst the entities, and then looking at that every single session. So we tend to wait until there's, hair on fire, and then we have to do something rather than establishing incrementally, looking at it every single session, and then looking at it every single session with a broad base of people that are engaged in the conversation. So I've listened to some hearings where I hear superintendents and teachers and community members give very eloquent remarks about what they really need, how they want to run their school districts, and then this getting totally ignored. So making sure that there's a real collaborative problem-solving effort. I think we have work to do on, the teacher retirement system, the insurance, to make sure that they're funded based on the cost of healthcare, rather than, again, these arbitrary amounts of money that people get that are not sufficient. So I don't know if that really answers your question, but definitely looking at it from what does it cost to deliver what we really want to give to our students.
Okay. And the flip side of that, you have the politicians who pat teachers on the head and tell them how great they are and do nothing. Then you have the politicians that love to go out there and talk about the school to prison pipeline and public schools are a failure, and which I don't concede. The only thing I believe schools have really failed at is communicating all of the good things that go on in public schools, and people are not aware of that.
Right.
But for the sake of argument, let's say for a moment that public schools are broken. What's broken, and how do you fix it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm with you. I don't think it's necessarily broken, but I think school districts are big entities that deal with lots and lots of people. So even making small changes take time and usually take money. And so there are a lot of people with a lot of advice, and a lot of people that have never worked in a school that say you should do this, this, this. Mm-hmm. That's just wrong, flat out wrong. And you heard it during COVID too. School districts were asked to change course multiple times in this planning for reopening or ending the last school year and reopening with very little direction. And I would sit there, and in my experience as an office manager and the wife of an administrator, and go, oh my gosh, you can't do that. It's going to take a lot of time to put that plan together, and it's going to cost money. So we're expecting people to move mountains, and we're not helping them do that. So I don't think it's necessarily broken. I think you do have to change with the time and make adjustments, but you need help with that, right? I don't think politicians listen. I think you're exactly right that they talk a lot, but they're not very good at listening. And I'm a learner, and I want the experts to tell me what you need, because I've seen the good work being done. And so when people say, oh, kids don't know how to do math, or kids don't know civics, or kids don't know this, I was like, you go in and take some of those classes on our campuses. I think a lot of people in the community couldn't get through it, right? Couldn't pass it, wouldn't know the answers, right? And then I think you just can't detach the fact that I think I read 60% of kids in Texas schools are eligible for free and reduced lunch. We have housing issues. I read the book Evicted a year or two ago, and one of the tough things about moms and dads having to move a lot because of these housing issues, it just totally messes up a kid's opportunity to learn. They don't have friends. They're backsliding constantly on their learning. And so we have to make sure that as a state that we're addressing those needs, because we've been putting that burden onto all of you in your schools. Why don't you fix it? these problems, whether it's mental health issues or food insecurity issues. And again, we saw that play out over and over again with COVID. It really laid bare that we have built an economy that is based on having schools open, so mom and dad can go to work. And being, I don't want to say dismissive of the real goal, to teach, it's home away from home. It becomes home away from home, right? So just being really cognizant of what you're going through, what teachers are going through and administrators are going to in this particular environment. You just can't not recognize that.
Sharon, you have definitely gone on the record on several pretty tough educational issues. We appreciate that. Last question. All is kind of in your court for this one. Is there anything we haven't talked about that you would like the viewers to know about you? Do you have an event you'd like to plug? This is your time. Oh, gosh. Everything we have is like Zoom, right? Zoom. So, anybody wants to phone bank with me, I'll have you send out my website and you can volunteer to do that. It's unfortunate with COVID that we're not getting out and about in the community. We do have a League of Women Voters forum, and my opponents will be there coming up this Thursday. So if you want to listen in on that, you can sign up on the League of Women Voters of Collin County. And then the week after that, we'll be participating in the Raise Your Hand Texas is going to have a forum, an education-focused forum for House District 66 and 67. And I'm not exactly sure how they're pushing that out, Raise Your Hand Texas. I think you can find them on Facebook, but I think they'll have it as a Facebook Live event on the Tuesday. Let's see, it's on the 29th of September. So if you want to hear me in contrast with my opponent, that would be a good opportunity for that. But I do want people to know that I'm an open door person. I respect the profession so much. I have seen so much good work be done. I have many members of my family are involved in many facets of the educational world. And when we get together and have conversations about it, I'm excited that these folks are working with our kids because their heart is there, their head is there. They are brilliant people. They know what they're doing. And teachers deserve a great amount of respect and support. So I'm looking forward to having input from everyone when I'm elected. We appreciate you joining us for this. I said I was going to bring up conversations later. I want to do that right now. First off, it's been a great conversation with you today. I really appreciate you coming. And to our viewers, there are probably questions you wanted asked that I didn't ask. I want to encourage you to have conversations just like this. Candidates and incumbents alike will talk with you. You can email, you can phone call, you can ask for an appointment and sit down and talk. And most of them will actually sit down and talk with you if they can find the time. Conversations are vital to democracy. You can't keep depending on media and advocacy groups to give you your information. We have to have these conversations. Sharon, you definitely went on the record. We really appreciate you coming today, and we wish you all the luck in the world on your campaign.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity.
As promised, a little more about the block vote. If you've never heard about the block vote, you're not alone. It's a new process that we espouse here at Texans for Public Education. As a group, we analyze the records of candidates and incumbents alike in regards to public education. We then assign a rating of neutral, friendly, or unfriendly to each candidate, regardless of party. All 31,000 members have a vote in those ratings. Once the ratings are set, we use them to unify our vote into one large block of votes. We do this only with state offices. Members are free to vote as they wish for any other office. We do not tell people how to vote. Instead, we come together and make the decision as a group. If you would like to know more about how the process works, please visit our website at texansforpubliceducation.com. We hope to see you on the next episode of On the Educational Record. Bye-bye.